before we take off, and here we are. So yeah, welcome everyone. My name is Hans-Peter. I'm the CEO of Teco 2030, and we are a fuel cell manufacturer, fuel cell development company. And yeah, in the next 15 minutes, we will talk about PEM fuel cells for marine and heavy-duty applications. Gary gave a really good overview before about the situation, in heavy-duty trucking. Let's have a look at the maritime industry, because I feel it often gets forgotten a little bit. But actually, yeah, almost 3% CO2, but almost 30% NOx and 20% particulate matter is not that great, especially even if we consider that around 90% of the world trade is shipped, and we can expect that to triple basically till 2050. And if there's nothing done in the marine or shipping industry, the emissions will raise actually to 18%. So what's happening, or also an overview, at the end we have an outdated fleet of over 100,000 vessels on the world seas. All those vessels are assets which have a lifetime of 20 to 30 years. And we have to consider that we have up to 1,500 to 3,000 new builds per year and roughly 800 ships scrapped. So what do we have on the regulatory side, on the IMO? So the clear direction to reduce the emissions from 2030 by 20 to 30%, and then go all the way to net zero basically by 2050. And if we look on the websites of the big shipping companies of the world, we read basically net zero in 2040, latest by 2050. So basically the industry is moving along actually. So what do we need though actually, or what is the challenge, let's say, for fuel cells in marine? Before also, Gary talked about fuel cells in trucking, so a lot of you talk about fuel cells in automotive industry or automotive applications, heavy-duty trucking. But in the marine industry, we are facing slightly different, let's say, requirements or challenges, because the fuel cell is on board of a ship at the end in the middle of an ocean, and what's very important, it's always safety first. So on board of a ship in marine, you have different, or I would say way different safety requirements and regulatories compared to, for example, in an automotive environment. For example, you need a separate safety controller. Everything needs to be redundant in case of an issue. So this is point number one. Second point, of course, the space on board of a ship is limited. So power density and also the form factor of a fuel cell plays a key role. Of course, the more power we can put into a certain amount of volume to basically match the power density of a diesel engine, for example. But also the form factor plays a role, because you want to install the fuel cells on the deck in the machine room. And as you maybe have seen or know, there's a lot of doors, watertight doors on board of ships, so the fuel cells need to fit through the doors. So you need to consider also your dimensions, basically. Very important, of course, also lifetime. If we look at ships, average shipping, vessels have like dry dock intervals every 3 or every 5 to 6 years actually. So of course a long lifetime of the fuel cell and stack technology and easy, let's say, maintenance and accessibility is important. Another requirement is of course the dynamic load response, where we know fuel cells tend to be not ideal. What do I mean by dynamic load response? It's basically if the captain goes in full throttle, or in the car or automotive world, if you go in pedal to the metal, you want to have immediately full power basically, or as fast as possible. So therefore it's important that the fuel cell have a good load response, 2-3 seconds I would say, or ideally under 1 second, to avoid basically big battery packs, which are used and typically to peak shave, basically between the request till the fuel cell response. Of course, efficiency, as in marine and ships, the fuel is basically 80%, or almost, as a rule of thumb, 80% of the TCO of the entire ship. So of course, the fuel efficiency is very important. Insulation resistance is one point which maybe not a lot of people are thinking about. In the automotive industry, we have 4 rubber wheels basically, so we are somehow isolated from the ground. But on a ship, we are basically constantly surrounded from water. which is a conductor. So a high insulation resistance of the fuel cell is an important topic in the marine industry. Another one is the in-feed pressure, which means what is the in-feed pressure the fuel cell can accept lowest. So if you, for example, say you need 20 bar of in-feed pressure into the fuel cell, and if you're working in marine industry, we also work with ammonia or methanol reformer. Basically, you use ammonia or methanol as carrier for hydrogen, and then companies developed cracker technology, and typically this cracker or reformer technology deliver hydrogen in the rather low outfeed pressure. So our fuel cell, or if a fuel cell requires a high in-feed pressure, you need a blower or compressors in between, which of course reduces the overall efficiency of the complete power draining system. So hydrogen in-feed pressure, low hydrogen in-feed pressure is also an important requirement for fuel cells on board of ships. Cooling, last but not least, me also coming from the automotive industry, to a certain degree, cooling is one of the key challenges of a fuel cell. Ideally, or on board of a ship, we are lucky because we have an endless amount of cooling water around us because we are surrounded by water, basically. So those are more or less some key requirements or challenges of fuel cells in marine. So what did we basically come up with? So we developed a fuel cell system. We call it the FCM 400. It has over 400 kilowatt in stored gross power. You see the dimensions. It's more or less the size of a double-door fridge at the end. It weighs 3,300 pounds roughly, and it is a so-called LT PEM fuel cell, so a low-temperature PEM fuel cell, which means that the exhaust, which there is no exhaust at the fuel cell, it's water vapor, is roughly at 60-70 degrees centigrade. So we have then, based on that L-temperature PEM fuel cell, as we use carbon-based bipolar plates, we come up to a lifetime of 35,000 hours with our technology, and we have a rated power, so basically average rated power of 325 kilowatt, and we can go to a big power up to 366 kilowatts and more at the end. Regarding the safety, which was safety first, as I mentioned on the previous slide, so we developed and designed an inherently gas-safe system and worked very closely together with DNV, which is one of the approval authorities for maritime. So from the beginning, you see on the fuel cell system on the left side, the box on the top right of the fuel cell is basically a box where we have everything which is in contact with hydrogen, which is a double-walled inerted box basically, which is also important in marine. Wherever, if you install this piece of equipment in a machine room, it doesn't make the machine room automatically do an explosion zone, which makes the piece of equipment basically easier to integrate board of ship. So this was our aim basically, to come up with a fuel cell designed for maritime, which can be integrated on board of ships. So one of the projects we are doing is a project together with Shell and also funded by EU Horizon. There we install, you see basically, that's a scan of the ship basically, so we did a 3D scan of the ship. We install on the bottom right, you see a 2.4 megawatt fuel cell system. This is basically 6 of our modules or fuel cell modules combined. Then on the left side you see a containerized solution with the power electronics, and then we have 4 tons of compressed hydrogen also installed on deck. We will do the fuel cell installation middle of next year. With this installation or retrofit, it enables Shell basically to reduce up to 55% of greenhouse gas emissions during voyage and 100% inboard. So basically, the ports where we have the majority, or where we have the big cities, where we need to reduce the emissions, also the automotive industries, as we heard before, trucks need to reduce the emissions. Also, I think this is the first aim of the marine industry, and we have already mandates in place in California where ships are not allowed to run their diesel engines when they import. So this is one of the first projects what we do, where we install the fuel cells on board of a ship. But another idea how fuel cells can be used in the marine industry, should that little video show. That's actually an example, a concept in Italy, where in the northern part of Italy, close by the Alps, we have good conditions basically for wind, to produce green hydrogen out of wind energy. liquefy that, transport that then to the port of Genova, where we have quite some ships and also cruise ship vessels. And the idea is there then, instead of in the project or concept before, we had the fuel cells installed on board of a ship. Here we basically have the containerized fuel cell system in the port, which is using hydrogen as fuel or potentially also ammonia with cracker technology. And then basically the shore power or the power is provided basically from the port, from berth to the vessel. So previous project, basically we brought the fuel cell to the ship. Here we bring basically the ship to the fuel cell at the end. This concept, of course, from Europe can also be transferred to the US, hopefully, because there's, I think, quite some cities who might have some requests from ports for shore power systems, but they are maybe missing a big cable in the ground somewhere to provide basically that connection. And either, as we see here in Miami, we can dig up, or they can dig up the whole city, or you at least can start, with a containerized shore power system as a starting point there. So again, ideally you have hydrogen storage then at berth, or you have it centralized in the port. You have a fuel cell, containerized fuel cell power generator, and you have your shore power system, which connects the fuel cell basically with the ship. Another idea, and this is a concept we came up with, because often you have it in ports that the ships are waiting basically at the shore outside the port until basically they can come in and do the loading and unloading of the cargo. So in that case, if you have a lot of ships parked, for example, Port of Long Beach, you see them usually outside lined up. In that case, you also bring the fuel cell basically with a barge to the ship. So that's the idea of that concept at the end, and to use basically the bow of the barge as hydrogen storage at the end, and have again on deck of the barge the containerized fuel cell genset at the end. So this was basically 3 applications of fuel cells in the marine, on board of a ship, at berth, or at the barge. Just about us a little bit in brief. Teco 2030, we are a Norwegian fuel cell company. We have our office here in the US in Miami, also an office in Singapore. And basically, as I said, we developed fuel cell systems for marine and heavy-duty applications, but of course it can be also used for stationary power generation, of course, wherever you want to replace a diesel generator. And at the end, some of our core technology, like stack technology, of course, also can be used for heavy-duty trucking or locomotives and other applications. With that being said, thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer some questions. And also, you're invited to meet us at our booth B32. Thank you.
Thank you, very interesting. What are the regulations for storing hydrogen on board under in the boat?
Sorry?
Can you store hydrogen inside the boat at the bottom?
Yes.
Is it allowed everywhere?
It's allowed. It's basically currently the marine industry, they're leaning heavily on LNG technology. Because in the marine, I mean, they are used to transport LNG, and basically or a lot of the hydrogen standards, which is under development at the moment, is leaned on LNG.
Because I saw another presentation where they talked about brittlement, and they said the hydrogen should be stored outside on the top of the deck, but I don't know.
I would say both is possible. It just depends also on the technology. If we, in the project I showed you, we work with compressed hydrogen. It's on deck because also we have the deck space. But from my point of view, with the right tank technology, there shouldn't be a problem to install it on the deck. So. Good. Thank you.